Hello, and welcome to The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. I am your host, Blaine Bartlett. This episode this week, I think you're going to find to be intriguing, just given a lot of stuff we've been hearing in the news lately about the Great Resignation. My guest today is Evan Sohn. He's the chairman and CEO of Recruiter.com. And I could not think of a better representative to speak about what's going on in the world today. And it's not just unique to the US, although this is where we get a lot of the press around this. So, Evan, I'm not going to go into a deep bio here. We'll just kind of work this in as we go. But from your perspective, and I've got my own bias on this, but from your perspective, first of all, just kind of define what you think the Great Resignation is and what it's about.
Sure. And again, thanks, Blaine, for having me on your show. I've been in preparation, listening, and it's watching, listening. It's a great segment that you do, and a real great benefit to all your listeners. The Great Resignation, let's break it all down for a moment. What most people don't know is that there's resignations every month. So the annual turnover in the US is around 22 to 25%, depending how you run the numbers. So financial services might have 15% and retail might have over 80%. So every month people quit and people get hired. And I know we tend to look at the job numbers, that once a month job numbers and go, oh crap, only 195,000 or 499,000 jobs were added. But what we really look at is how many millions of people are hired every month, how many millions quit, how many people are hired. So the Great Resignation was really incremental to the general average. So if you look at the 160 million working adults in the US, divide that by 25%, something like that, 22%. So 3.5 million people are quitting every month, something like that. That was kind of the average in 2019. So in August of 21, we saw 4.5 million people quit, or 4.3 the following month, whatever the numbers were. So the Great Resignation was, oh my God, everyone saw 4.3, 4.5 million people quit. This is crazy. The reality is it was more than usual, right? And again, significant more, but more than usual. So the first question is, why did this happen now? What were people waiting for? And I think that there was a buildup of people waiting to see what happens before they actually left their job. Now, this time around, people are leaving because, hey, I moved to Florida, my office is in New York, and now they want me to come back. Or, hey, you know what? I like working from home all the time. My company wants me to come in twice a week. I don't want to do that. Done. I had childcare. My grandma used to watch the children, and now she doesn't want to do it anymore because of COVID. There are a variety of reasons why the Great Resignation happened. And at the same time, there was this huge talent shortage also, right? So you had wage inflation, talent shortage. So people leaving to go across the street to get a better job. I also think that something that we're not really tracking, that no one really tracks, is the rise of the gig economy. Not too long ago, sort of pre-pandemic levels, 35% of all adults actually had a side hustle. It's a big number, 35% of all. And I think what you start to see happen is if I'm working at home and I'm remote, why not just make my side hustle my present job? And anecdotally, I've seen that happen with some people. So I think there's a lot of things that are going on to this Great Resignation. Long-winded answer for you, Blaine, but I asked for it, so the least I can do is give it to you.
Well, what I love about this is it opens up a whole lot of little rabbit holes that we can go down. And part of the theme on this podcast, and this is why the title of it, The Soul of Business, it's my take on highly effective businesses that they do. I mean, every business starts with, what I'm calling the soul. There's a spirit, there's this ideation, there's something that quickened an idea that spawned the business to begin with. And and for every one of these businesses that we see around the world today, at the beginning, there was a lot of energy, a lot of focus, a lot of desire to have what we were offering, whether it was a product or service, brought to market because we thought it would make a difference. Now, as companies start to organize and they start to grow, Yeah, this is just a real quick primer on how business organizations work for those of you that are listening. But that idea starts to fade into the background. And the business of the business becomes more important than the business of the idea being delivered into the marketplace. Now, in my experience, and I'm real open to pushback on this, Evan, in my experience, when employees have an opportunity to thrive, and by thriving, I'm talking here about tapping into feelings and opportunities to be able to do what they love to do in their life. They will stay around environments in which that possibility exists. Organizations that have moved away from their ideal, that ideated state, tend to not have those opportunities as frequently. Now, that's just kind of a little monologue here to lay a question in place here. The idea of the Great Resignation, one of the things that I've been doing is calling it the Great Reclamation. And what I'm talking about in the tense in which I'm using it here is that, and you address this, people have, in this 2-year period, 24-month, 30-month period that we've been in, have come to realize that the satisfaction that they were getting or not getting in the traditional work environment, the cost benefit ratio didn't justify going back. And that cost benefit ratio had little to do with the paycheck. It had more to do with this internal sense of satisfaction. 35% have got a side hustle. Why do they have a side hustle? Well, because part of it's to make money, but it's also a reflection of something that they love to do. So with all of that, that's just a thesis that I'm kind of working with right here. The gig economy, the biggest sectors that are hit with this right now are in retail. There's a lot of churn in retail normally anyway. How do we square that hole?
Right. So, I think that fundamentally what you're saying, and we've been tracking this, we do a recruiter index every month. So we've been surveying our recruiters, get their sentiment, and we publish those results, once a month, usually the day before the job report comes out, day before, day after, depending on the month. And what we've really seen over this period of time, and we've been doing it since May of 2020, is the rise or the changing candidate priorities. So we asked the recruiters, what are your candidates prioritizing? And I grew up in a world where money could solve all problems. And what you're really saying now is what we've seen in the index is compensation is no longer the first priority for candidates. And again, this is as a whole. Or I'm generalizing to prove a point. Work-life balance, remote work, new experiences, those are the things now that the new generation or the current candidates are interested in. And it's actually fascinating, right? Because it means that you have to create an environment. Depending on who you're trying to attract, money is not necessarily going to do it. Maybe it's 4 days a week. Maybe it's opportunities to travel. I don't know what it is, but we get to then figure it out. At the same time, what I also find fascinating is, let's talk about during the pandemic, companies needed to balance everybody, right? Remote and don't worry, you're not coming back in, and all these other things. And I think part of what companies get to do now is actually change their own priorities for whatever they want to solve for. I was getting calls when like JP Morgan Chase was forcing everyone back into the office. How bad are they? They're terrible. This is disgrace. And I'm like, actually, they've decided that what's important to them is the in-person training for the next generation of JP Morgan employees. And that's what they're optimizing for. Shopify, on the other hand, based in Ottawa, they said, gee, we'll take talent from wherever they are on the planet, because I want to now get a bigger talent pool than just people that want to live in Ottawa. So I don't shame anybody. I just think it's an opportunity for companies to say, this is what I want to be. I don't have to be all things to all people. Blaine, I heard a great podcast probably 3 weeks ago of a CEO who was an engineer. And he goes, our culture was very simple. I surrounded myself with engineers, and we did our work and then went home to our friends and family. We didn't have beer parties. We didn't have pizza Fridays. We got our work done. Then we went home. And I was like smiling because that's what we could do. Like, you decide what sort of company you have. You don't have to be all things to all people anymore, because now people are sort of saying, I only want to work in this environment. I only work in this environment. And I think it's really fascinating that a company now gets to sort of make that decision. And one of our predictions for 2020 is that the work from hire theme that you're hearing today, work from anywhere theme that you're hearing today is going to morph into hire from anywhere. Right. So it's not work from anywhere is candidate centric, and hire from anywhere is going to be company centric. And later on this year, it's going to be companies that decide, where do I want to hire from? You know, if you work for me, Blaine, and you never want to come back in the office again, then I don't need to have someone as high priced as you are. Right. I could find someone who could do that job who lives outside the US or wherever they are in the US, et cetera. And I think that this hire from anywhere phenomena is really going to come with full force. And we're seeing that now with relationships that we have with companies.
Yeah, it's the reclamation, I've been reclaiming my life, but there are, it's a double-edged sword. I mean, there's no free lunch. I mean, this is kind of what I'm hearing you say here, hire from anywhere. Companies are going to do what's in their own best interest, obviously.
That's right.
Yeah, they
That's
are.
right.
And they've got an organizing principle that is consistent with how do we go to market, and what do we, what do we need to do from a qualitative standpoint and from an execution standpoint to be able to do that well?
That's right. Now, the funny part is, 5 years ago, we were talking about the efficacy of remote work.
Mhm.
Right. 5 years ago, that's what we were talking about. Oh, this guy wants to work at home once a week. I know he's not getting his job done, blah, blah. Like, no one even talks about that anymore.
No.
Right. So now the question is, do I make someone ever come back in the office? And finally, I think my last comment on this sort of theme is that I think as a society, we are slowly shifting from a time-based society to an outcome-based society. Do I really care how many hours you worked yesterday, or do I care about what you actually got done? Do I want to see, it's the old, I want to see you at your desk, or do I want to see you actually get done what you were getting done at your desk? So I think those things are really you're going to see more and more of that conversation.
Yeah, and I absolutely love that, because there's research data that shows over and over and over again that one of the key motivating factors in life is an experience of autonomy.
Yeah.
And I was talking with a CEO of a firm that I'm doing some work with, and she was lamenting the fact that one of her employees, and it's not a huge organization, but she had been brought to her attention that one of her employees that was working from home wasn't putting in the hours. Or more precisely, they didn't have a way of actually assessing whether the hours were being put into play. And my question to her was, does it make a difference?
That's right.
If in fact they're delivering what you're asking for, if they can do that in 2 hours, knock yourself out.
That's right.
And then make a bigger request.
It doesn't work for all industries, but I come from sales. No one ever said, I'm sorry you didn't make your number, but at least you worked really hard last month. It just doesn't make a difference. So I think, you got to be able to measure it. Those are all the things that, we're talking about the soul of a company. It's really not about clocking in and clocking out time. Fundamentally, Blaine, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, if I got an email from someone at 11:30 at night, I would say, wow, Blaine's working really hard.
Yeah.
If you send me an email now at 11 o'clock at night, 11:30, my assumption is you took off, you worked the day, you then had dinner with the family, we're doing homework with the kids, hanging out, watching some television, and now you're checking your emails before you go to sleep. And again, but either one might be the same, but this is sort of the assumption that we have today, is that we're not sitting. And by the way, this is really leading towards sort of that work-life balance. Is that a good thing that you did, or a bad thing? And the answer is, hey, look, if you were strapped to your desk all day long and now it's 11:30 at night, you're still at your office sending an email, you and I would consider that a bad work-life balance. Yeah. The fact that you took off time to go hang out with the family and prioritize your own personal life, and now, thanks to the internet, are going back online at night and wrapping things up so you're not pressed in the morning, I find that to be a very good work-life balance.
Yeah. There's an interesting distinction that I make in the coaching work that I do with a lot of my executives. is, and it's a distinction between performance and contribution. And performance tends to be more tied to traditional ways of doing work. And it's kind of, can we judge the hourly, the hourly time that you actually spend at work? And were you showing up? Did you seem to be busy? Contribution has a completely different attribute to it.
Yeah.
And
I agree completely. I agree completely.
Yeah. So when we come back, we're going to take a real quick break here. When we come back, what I'd like to do is unbundle that a little bit just in terms of demographics. And I'm specifically interested in those that are in positions of management or supervision, how that, that distinction between performance and contribution begins to get squared in the new economy that we find ourselves in.
Sounds great.
Okay. So speaking with Evan Sohn, CEO and chairman of Recruiter.com, we will be right back in just a moment.
I want to thank you for listening. I want to also invite you right now to go to blainebartlett.com. And on that site, which is my personal website, you'll see services up on the top menu. I'd like you to click on Leadership Mastermind. Now, why I want you to do that is we have structured a mastermind program that is very unusual and it is very powerful. And by going onto that site and clicking that link, you'll be taken to a landing page that is an invitation to join this mastermind. It's a 52-week-long exploration of what it takes to be a highly effective leader in today's fast-changing environment. You won't regret it. And if you've been liking what you've been listening to on these Soul of Business podcasts, how does one become a leader that can keep connection to the soul of business? That's what we look at. That's what we're about in this mastermind program. So again, go to blainebartlett.com and click on the services link. And there you'll find the link to the Leadership Mastermind program. Look forward to seeing you there. Thanks for listening to this little commercial. And now back to our show.
Welcome back. Again, speaking with Evan Sohn, CEO and the chairman of Recruiter.com. Evan, you've been in business a long time. I mean, and I say that just, as we're sitting here looking at each other, you got the same color hair I do.
There you go.
So we've been around the track a couple of times. We've seen things happen. And a lot of my work is organized around, the power and impact of mindset on the way that the results are produced. And by mindset, I'm talking more, specifically around belief systems that have been kind of entrenched and solidified and reified. Gen Z, Gen X coming into the workforce. We've been talking about work-life balance. Different compensation dynamics come into play here. Money isn't the motivator that people used to think that it was, and that it certainly isn't today. This whole idea of, from a mindset perspective, paying attention to how people are performing relative to legacy metrics, as opposed to how they're contributing. What's the biggest challenge to somebody that is in a management position? They're probably in their late 40s, early 50s, something like that. What are they facing here that they need to actually pay attention to?
Yeah, look, I think the biggest challenge that we're facing today in this regard is how do you train the next group of people, no matter what level you are, in a virtual environment? The proverbial, hey, follow me around and sit in the corner and don't talk in a conference room. Blaine's coming in and I'll say, hey, Freddie, find out if Blaine wants coffee. Freddie's my whatever Freddie is. I've only once been on a Zoom meeting where there was someone I didn't recognize and they're like, oh yeah, this is my, entry-level person. They're just following me around. Like no one does that. Or few people do that. And so the challenge really is in this virtual environment is how do you embark a culture? How do you teach someone those sort of skills? It's not just about, it's about identifying problems, it's solving problems. And how do you do that in this new hybrid virtual environment? And again, I think the number of companies that are going to be 100% in person are far and few between. And I think most of your audience is probably living in this sort of hybrid world. And how do you do that? What's crazy is I was using Zoom 5 years ago. And 5 years ago, Zoom, we used to call it like a video conference call, right? Let's have a video conference call. You had Skype, you had GoToMeeting, there were a bunch of these things that you had, and obviously Zoom. And now, so it was an upgrade from a conference call, and now it's a downgrade from a face-to-face meeting, right? I view this session between the two of us as it could have been in person, but instead we're doing it over Zoom. This isn't a conference call. It's that instead we're actually here. And so the question now is, how do you train people? How do you teach people to do that? In the old days, or not so old days, you would tell your salesperson, look, stop emailing, pick up a phone, call the person, and schedule a meeting. Deals are done face-to-face. That's how you get deals done. Is that happening now, right? How do you solve problems where you're not all sitting in the same room and you have a whiteboard and you could order in a pizza and solve those problems? And I think those are really the challenges that you have to sort of deal with, because it's just affecting everybody now.
Yeah. To that point, you've got an interesting background in tech. You got the instant messaging. And I won't go into a lot of that stuff, but you've been on CNBC, you've been on Yahoo Finance, and I'm talking about those two in particular because, the AI function. Now that seems like a little bit of a jump here, but AI coming into play is impacting across the board all kinds of ways that we interact with our clients, with our subordinates, with our peers, with you just fill in the blank. Where is AI fitting in this whole dynamic?
Yeah, so I think AI, again, we at Recruiter, we have our own AI platform for sourcing candidates, and it's just fantastic. 160 plus million profiles in our database that we engage for clients, large and small. I think that what AI is doing, is the old macros that you and I sort of grew up with, right? What was a macro? Oh, I do the same 20 steps and I can create a macro to do the same 20 steps for me. I think AI is the next level there. The AI is really doing some of the mundane things that we used to do. Hey, you know what? Go through this list and find these people. And instead of just giving me a list that we would do back, 10, 15 years ago, reach out to them through SMS with these messaging, it's more sequencing and using AI bots and all this other stuff as part of it. But, so much of what we do, and certainly in the recruiting world, recruiting is a human interaction. Yeah. I don't care how many bots you got, and AI and ShmAI and all the other AIs, no one is coming to work at your company or my company or any restaurant without actually talking to somebody. I don't care if you're the CEO, the CTO, or the dishwasher. You're not showing up to a job saying, hey, I didn't talk to anyone, but I'm ready to work. Right? Someone in that process is making sure that I am who I am, that I understand the culture, et cetera. So I think that the reason I'm pointing that out is there's a stopping point of what AI does, right? So in the recruiting world, what we want to use our AI platform for is to find me the people so I can spend more time having meaningful conversations than spending time finding them. So using technology to do the things that take up way too much time, so I can actually focus on the things that I should be doing, not the things that I have to do. And that's probably when I think about AI, that's really what I would want to see happen. More and more things so I could do my real job. What's my real job? My real job is X and Y, and all those other things. How do we move that off my plate?
The idea that we connect best through vulnerability and we disconnect through certainty, and just this notion. And I'm speaking about this in terms of the AI throughput that you were just referencing here. AI will sort through some very specific parameters to get somebody to a position where, and I'm looking at this from a recruiting standpoint, where I can get them in the door to talk to me about coming to work with me. Authenticity is a different animal, and who I hire makes a difference. What I'm learning, this is not new news to anybody, I don't think, but who I hire makes such an incredible difference. And if I'm hiring for skill set, I'm going to be dead in the water in the long term. because I'm not really attending to the culture of the organization in the way that it needs to be attended to. What are you finding, Evan, that is being used today? And then I kind of come back to this Great Resignation, and employment numbers, unemployment numbers were up surprisingly this last week.
Yeah.
When I'm looking to get somebody in a seat to actually perform, number one, and contribute greatly, number two, how are we sorting for authenticity? And I know that's probably a $64,000 question, and that statement dates me, a little bit.
Yeah.
Here.
So you got a lot of questions there in one fell swoop, and it really depends on the role itself. I think that what you need to be asking as a business owner, or in this case, a hiring manager, is what's the progression for this job, right? What sort of person do I want? What do I want their values to be? And what's going to happen next to them, right? Because fact of the matter is, what the candidate wants to know is, when I'm done with this role, what do you got for me?
Yeah.
Right. So I think that, hey, look, here are the skills you're going to learn. Here are the things you're going to contribute. Here's what I expect your performance to be. And then here's what happens next. So after the next 6 months or a year or 2 years, here's what's going to happen to you. Here are the skills you're going to have, et cetera. Now, are you interested in that? Is that aligned with what you're trying to do here now? Because the reality is, if they're not, and the person still takes the job, they'll be looking to leave in 4 months. By the way, like 60% of all millennials, this was a survey, have no problem leaving a job within the first 6 months.
Yep.
So, if you're not creating a role that is meaningful for them, how do they fit into the overall puzzle? But also at the same time, you're a business owner, you got to be building a bench, right? You got to be, getting the 5 people on the bench, knowing that 2 are going to leave, and or whatever that number is. You got to be, where's your camp? Not camp. Where's your what's it called? There's a baseball for, where are the minor leagues? Where are you bringing people up through the process, through the system? And my recommendation is to sort of look at your own business and create areas where you could build a bench. Create areas where you could take people right out of college, find the young people who have the inherent drive to be part of the team, et cetera, and use them as part of that field level. Get them into the overall process itself, because then you're inculcating people. And by the way, it's a class. So if you're worried about doing things virtually, you have 4 people that start on the same day. They could communicate with each other. It's all these other things.
Yeah.
Part of the problem, I know we're almost out of time, is that pre-pandemic, we were forced into a culture, right? We were forced into it. I had to show up to the office.
Yep.
We had to it was Debbie's birthday. We all had to go to the conference room, celebrate Debbie's birthday. We all had to do that.
Yep.
We see people, let's have lunch, let's have coffee. And as much as we prefer to be back in our own office, delivering, contributing, and performing, we were forced into this culture environment. Oh, look how friendly it is. Everyone's friendly. Everyone's got their own desk, pictures of children, et cetera. Now we actually have to make time for culture. So whereas culture was sort of part of what we were doing, it was part of the experience of going to the office every day. Now we actually have to make time for it. And by the way, guys like us, we might have felt, since we were buying pizza for the company on Friday, check the box on culture. Oh, look, hey, Blaine, what are we doing for culture? I buy lunch for everyone on Friday. There you go. I'm done. Now, what are you sending someone pizza on Friday? That's not doing it. There's a whole, how do you create that? And I struggle with that all the time. Struggle with it all the time.
Yeah. I love this, and I know that we are getting close to wrapping here. Just the idea of contribution. You've got a foundation, and I want to be sure that we touch on this, because I know that this is something that's important to you. Do you want to talk a little bit about the foundation?
Yeah. So thank you for asking. I had a brother who died in 1993 from cancer. He was 1 day short of 29, and he was a Wall Street trader. And his boss and manager and friends approached the family. They wanted to do something in my brother's memory, and they had this fantastic idea for a conference series that was sort of a best idea conference in the hedge fund market. And we years later, we started a foundation out of it, et cetera. And we've raised over $100 million for pediatric cancer, cancer research, and other childhood diseases and causes really on a global level. So if you think about the big conference was in New York, but now we have 11 cities around the world: San Francisco, Toronto, Hong Kong, Mumbai, Tel Aviv, Sydney, Sao Paulo, Monaco, London. I probably forgot one. They'll probably get upset with me that I forgot one. But really, really exciting. And it's just doing really good work. And all the money really goes to support local charities. It's been a real honor for me to honor my brother in such a regard. It used to be called the Irish Sohn Investment Research Conference. Then it became the Irish Sohn Research Conference. Then it became the Irish Sohn Conference. And then I guess the marketing people said, look, just call it Sohn. And it's really a pleasure. And things like the decimation of Lehman Brothers in 2008 was done by David Einhorn at the Irish Sohn Conference. Shamath Palahniuk, who's in the news now, his long on Amazon a bunch of years ago was at the Sohn Conference. Bill Ackman's Herbalife short, that was a Sohn Conference, but his Allied Steel was his another one that he did also at the Sohn Conference. So we've had some very, very interesting calls at the conference. Again, it's a great event. You can go to sohnconference.org to check it out. But we'll be virtual, I think, in May in the New York area. But there's usually one coming up at any point in time in the calendar.
When I read that, I was just thrilled because my wife and I, she founded a foundation, and just the work that you do from a social impact perspective, I just take my hat off to that. I truly do.
Thank you.
I'm sorry I learned about your brother.
Thank you. I'm going to quote Ken Langone, who spoke years ago at the conference. We usually have a keynote speaker that's not a Wall Street guy that just talks about, philanthropy. And Ken Langone, great line was, I didn't know how much I had till I saw how much I was giving away. And I thought that was like a very, very nice metric there. So it's really a lot of fun. Thank you.
Yeah, the whole idea of being a center of distribution. Yeah,
that's right.
It all comes back. So Evan Sohn, thank you so much for the time. CEO, chairman of recruiter.com. You all are familiar with recruiter.com. So don't hesitate if you want to find a little place to land someplace. If you're looking for a home, that's probably going to place to start. So
thank you so much, Blaine. And really, thank you so much for the time and the opportunity to talk to you and your audience.
My pleasure, my friend. You take care. Blessings. You've been listening to Blaine Bartlett on the Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. And you can find out more about what we're up to at blainebartlett.com. We'll see you on the next episode. Thank you for listening.